She woke before the sun because the cold did not wait for morning. Barn was quiet except for the slow breath of the animals and the soft sound of wind moving through broken. With this place was all she had, and it asked for work every hour of the day. Her hands were rough and tired, but they kept moving because stopping meant thinking, meant remembering what was gone. The barn stood at the edge of open land where grass fought too. The boards were old and uneven, and the roof bent. Low in the middle, light slipped through thin cracks and drew pale lines. On the dirt floor, she had fixed what she could. With rope and hope some days, it felt like the barn was breathing with her, sharing the same tired life she lived alone. Now once there had been voices and laughter and plans for better days, those sounds faded one by one until only silence stayed. People in the nearby town knew her as the woman by the barn. They nodded when they passed, but did not stop. In the West, everyone carried their own weight, and hers was not worth sharing. Each morning followed the same pattern. She fed the animals, checked the water, and cleaned the stalls. Her body moved from memory because there was no time to learn new ways. The sun climbed slowly and warmed the air just enough to make work easier. By midday, sweat marked her shirt and dust clung to her skin. Still, she did not complain because the land had no ears. The barn had been built by hands that believed in tomorrow. Those hands were gone now, leaving only marks in the wood. She could still see them when the light was right. Scratches near the door where tools once hung, a faded mark where a wall had been measured and cut. These small signs kept her steady. They reminded her that life had once grown here. Food was simple and often scarce. She ate what she could grow and what the land allowed. Some nights she went to sleep hungry and told herself it was nothing new. The body learns to accept less when it must. The heart learns slower. It still reached for more, even when the mind said no. Town sat a short ride away, but it felt far. Wooden buildings leaned together like tired Minnesota, a small place to eat, and a post where notices were nailed. She went only when she had two eyes followed her. Then not unkind, but curious people wondered why she stayed alone by a barn that barely stood. She wondered too, but never long enough to leave. There was pride in staying, not the loud kind, but the quiet sort that keeps a person upright. She believed leaving would mean giving up on those who came before her. The land had taken much from her, but it had also shaped her strength. Every hard day taught her how to last. Every cold night taught her how to endure. The weather ruled everything. When storms came, the barn shook and the animals grew restless. She would sit awake, listening to the wind push against the walls. Rain leaked through the roof and pooled on the ground. She moved buckets and whispered calm words to the animals. In those moments, fear came close, but did not when she had learned to listen, not just to the animals or the wind, but to the land itself. The ground spoke in signs and silence. It warned her of storms and told her when to plant. It did not lie, but it did not comfort either. Living here meant accepting truth without softness. Time's memories crept in without asking, a shared meal, a laugh by firelight, a promise spoken long ago. These thoughts hurt most in the quiet hours. She pushed them away by working harder. Pain could not keep up with busy hands, but when night fell and the dark grew thick, it returned. She slept on a narrow bed near the animals. Their warmth helped in winter, and their presence eased her mind. Loneliness is louder when a person is truly alone here. There was always movement and breath. It reminded her she was still part of something living. Even if that something was small, the barn was not just shelter. It was a boundary between her and the world inside. She felt some control outside. Everything felt uncertain and sharp. She knew how to fix broken boards, but not broken futures, so she stayed where her skills mattered. People talked about leaving and finding better places. She listened without joining the talk. Better was a word that sounded good but felt empty. What mattered was surviving today. Tomorrow could worry about itself. That was how she had learned to live. One step, one task, one breath. As the seasons turned, the barn aged with her. New cracks formed and old Ones grew wider. She patched them with care, like wound seach repair, was a small victory proof that she could keep going, that effort still meant something in a hard world there. Were moments of quiet beauty, a sunrise, painting, the land in soft colors, the sound of hooves. Far away, carried by morning air, the smell of fresh earth after rain. These moments did not last, but they stayed in her memory. They gave her reason to rise again. She did not dream much anymore. Dreams felt like promises that might break still sometimes as she rested. Her eyes, she imagined a different life, one with shared work and shared meals. She never stayed in those thoughts long. Wanting too much felt dangerous. Barn had seen many endings. Born and lost, seasons begin and end. She understood that life moved in cycles. Loss was part of it as much as growth. Knowing this did not make it easier, but it made it clearer. She did not ask why anymore. As evening came, she closed the doors and checked the locks. The land could be kind, but it could also turn rough. Without warning, she stayed alert even when tired. Survival demanded attention. Trusting the night too much could cost everything. She sat on a small stool and ate a simple meal. The taste was plain, but it filled her enough. Her thoughts drifted to the road that passed near the barn. Travelers sometimes moved along it, heading somewhere else. She watched them from a distance and wondered what pulled them forward. The road had given her nothing so far, only dust and passing shadows. Still, she kept it in sight, as if it might one day offer change. Not hope exactly, but possibility. Possibility felt safer than hope. Asked less and promised nothing. As darkness settled, the barn grew still. Stars filled the sky bright and endless. She stepped outside for a moment and breathed the cool air. The world felt large and quiet around her. In that space she felt small, but steady. She did not know that change was close. She did not sense the shift waiting beyond the next storm. Life had taught her not to expect surprises, so she prepared for another day, just like the last, believing that was all there would ever be. She lay down and listened to the familiar sounds of the barnwood creaking, animals shifting, wind moving through grass. These were the sounds of her life, hard, simple, and honest. She closed her eyes, ready to face tomorrow the same way she faced today, with strength learned from loss and a heart that kept going even when it was tired. One evening, as the sun sank low in the sky, a stranger appeared on the horizon. Dust followed him with every step, and his clothes were torn and worn. He walked with a slight limp and carried a small bundle of things that looked heavy. As she watched from the barn, knowing strangers could bring trouble or help, but often both, the man stopped at the edge of her land and looked toward the barn. She stepped outside and called to him softly to see if he would respond. His voice was rough when he answered, but there was no anger. He asked for a place to rest just for a night and promised to leave in the morning. She studied him carefully. There was a story in the lines of his face, eyes that had seen fear and lost, hands that knew hard work. Something about him made her think he was not a man who would take more than offered. Still, she hesitated because trust was not given lightly. Finally, she nodded and stepped aside. He entered slowly and examined the barn with the same careful eyes she used to inspect every corner. He set down his bundle and began to tend to a small wound on his arm. It was not much, but she realized he had traveled far and suffered much. Days passed, and he stayed longer than he had planned. Day they spoke more. He told pieces of his story in small fragments without asking for sympathy. She listened and offered what she could without words of judgment. Their routines intertwined without plant, feeding animals, cleaning stalls, and tending fires became shared tasks. There was an ease to their work. Together, silent understanding grew between them. Noticed how he moved with careful attention and how he did not waste energy. He noticed how she treated the animals, not just with care, but with respect. They did not speak of love or promise, but something softer began to grow. At night, they sat by a small fire near the barn. Smoke curled into the sky, and the stars looked down as if listening. The silence between them was not empty. It was filled with quiet trust. and companionship she had not felt this. Close to another person in years, sometimes he shared memories that made him flinch a town. Burned by greed, a friend lost to violence, nights spent in loneliness, she offered small comforts, say warm meal. Steady hand, a listening ear, he did not need words for gratitude. The look in his eyes said it all. The barn took on a new rhythm with him. There it felt less lonely walls that once seemed to echo. Sadness now held life. The animals sensed the change. To horses nickered softly, and the dog wagged a tail more often even. The wind seemed softer as it moved through the space. They learned from each other. She taught him how to mend broken fences and read weather signs. He showed her ways to make work easier and safer. They laughed, sometimes in quiet moments, not loud laughter, but the kind that fills a person from inside. The town noticed the stranger but did not understand him. People whispered about travelers and danger. She ignored them because she had learned that people will always talk. Their words carried little weight against what she saw in him. Storms came and he helped prepare the barn together. They moved animals into safe corners and patched weak board. She realized she could rely on him, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. Trust was not demanded, it was earned and given. In small steps, there were moments when the world felt cruel. Food ran low, the wind howled, and their bodies ached from work. Yet they continued, not out of duty, but out of care for one another and the life they were building together. She watched him sometimes as he slept by the fire after work, his breathing even and his face relaxed. Man who had known fear and loss now rested. She felt a strange warmth in her chest. Something she had thought was gone returned slowly. They shared small meals and quiet evenings. Nothing dramatic happened, no sudden declarations or grand gestures, but every shared moment built a connection stronger than words. In the quiet of the barn, a bond was forming. The first hint of snow arrived, and the land turned white. Cold wind cut through the barn cracks. Together, they repaired weak spots and fed the animals carefully. The work brought them closer. Shared hardship had a way of making people rely on each other without needing to speak. He began to talk more of the road he had traveled. His past was harsh, but he carried it lightly now. She listened and sometimes offered thoughts without judgment. The walls of her heart that had once been closed began to loosen. Evenings grew longer and their conversation deeper. They spoke of dreams that had once seemed impossible. The past still lingered, but the present offered warmth. Not romantic declarations, but a gentle understanding that they were no longer alone. The barn seemed to breathe differently. Light slanted through cracks differently even. The animals responded to the change. They were calmer and more trusting. The presence of two people caring for them made life steadier. When the night was quiet, she sometimes felt his gaze, not in a demanding way, but observing and thinking. She met it without fear. Curiosity grew where caution had ruled before. Days turned to weeks, and the bond strengthened. It was not love as the stories told, but something quieter and deeper. Respect, care, and shared struggle formed a foundation. They were learning that trust could grow into something unexpected. The world beyond the barn remained harsh. Travelers passed quickly, and the town stayed distant. Yet inside the barn, a small world existed where safety and understanding lived. Was fragile, but relit. Depended on care and effort. She realized she had not known companionship for many years. Stranger brought it, not with grand words, but with steady presence. She had learned to endure alone, but she was beginning to see life differently. The road outside still called to him. She wondered if he would leave at any moment, but she did not ask. Time had taught her that pressing too hard destroys fragile things. So she allowed the bond to grow naturally. Each day they shared simple routines, feeding animals, tending fires, patching fences, and preparing meals. Every small task became a moment of connection. Every glance and gesture carried meaning. They were learning each other without forcing it. At night, they watched the stars and listened to wind moving through grass. They did not speak much, but silence became a conversation, a quiet acknowledgement that both had suffered and survived, that both were beginning to trust again. She felt a cautious hope she had not known in years. It's not a loud hope, but a steady one. Kind that moves slowly but does not break. Easily it settled in her chest, like a warm ember. Life at the barn changed not because of magic, but because someone had come to share Itaman with his own wounds and care for the land had entered her quiet world together. They faced cold nights, hard work, and small victories, and through this shared experience, a new chapter began quietly, without fanfare, but with strength. The winter passed, and the land grew hard and cold. The barn had weathered storms and nights of bitter wind inside the walls. The air was warmer, with two people moving together in routine. Yet, beyond the quiet world of the barn, trouble was stirring. Travelers brought news of men who wanted the land for themselves, powerful men who did not care about barns, animals, or the quiet life of a woman who had survived loss. Rumors reached her ears through whispers in town and passing strangers. They said a stranger had come with her and that outsiders often invited danger. She felt unease in her chest, not fear of the unknown, but fear for the life she had carved. That barn and land were her work, her memories, and her safety. She would not give them up easily. One afternoon, a rider appeared on the road. Dust rose around him like a cloud. He wore a wide hat and rode with purpose. She watched from the barn as he stopped and looked toward her property. There was no warmth in his gaze. His sound presence carried authority and threat. The stranger with her noticed immediately. He went outside without hesitation. The rider dismounted and approached with a look that demanded answers. Words were exchanged, and she could hear tension in their tones. The visitor was testing boundaries and measuring courage. They returned to the barn later that day. The visitor left warnings in his wake. Land was a valuable thing. Animals and barns meant little to men with power. They would come again if they sensed weakness. They spent that night preparing. Boards were reinforced, fences strengthened, and animals moved to safer corners. Work was silent and careful. They did not speak much because each action carried meaning. The bond between them had grown, and now trust became necessity. Watch the stranger with her moving with precision. He knew how to handle conflict without using anger. She learned from him, and together they created plans to face whatever might come. Quiet life they had known was shifting toward something sharper. Days later, the threat returned. A small group appeared at the edge of her land. They demanded entry and questioned the ownership of the barn. Shay stood beside the stranger, hands steady and her voice calm. Neither of them backed down. The men left with warnings. Their threats hung in the air like heavy smoke. She felt her pulse quicken, not from fear but from understanding the stakes. They could lose everything if they were not careful. They repaired and strengthened the barn again, crack filled with new boards each week, spot checked and rechecked. The land demanded vigilance, and the two of them moved in sync. The stranger taught her how to observe without panic. She taught him patience and caution. The animals sensed tension. Horses neighed and dogs growled softly. She calmed them with quiet words and careful touch. The presence of life around her reminded her of what she fought to protect. Nights were long and filled with planning. They stayed alert, listening to the wind and distant sounds. The cold seemed harsher in moments of stress. They kept fires burning and moved quietly through the barn. Each step was careful and intentional. She noticed fear in the stranger, to not fear of battle, but fear of failure. He had seen too many things lost to recklessness. She gave no words of comfort, yet her steady presence gave reassurance. Trust in action became their language. The road beyond the barn was no longer a distant idea. It was a boundary and a danger. They watched it constantly. Travelers who passed carried rumors and information. Every whisper mattered. She learned more about the stranger each day. His past shaped him, but did not define him. He carried pain, but it did not stop him from acting. She felt respect grow for the quiet courage he displayed. One morning, they discovered signs of intrusion. Footprints in snow near the barn suggested men had been scouting. No one had harmed the animals, yet but the warning was clear. They strengthened fences again and moved the animals to more secure places. Every task took time and effort. At the barn felt alive with purpose. They were not alone in their struggle. Trust became a shield and cooperation a weapon. The tension brought unexpected closeness. Shared moments of quiet working together reinforced the bond. They did not speak of love or commitment, yet their actions were inseparable from care. Strangers shared more of his past. He had known violence and betrayal and had traveled long distances to find peace. She shared memories of loss and hard survival. No words promised love, yet understanding deepened. One night, as the wind howled and snow fell hard. They sat by the fire outside the barn. The world felt cruel and dangerous. Inside the walls, they felt prepared. Safe entirely, but ready to face what came. Every sound outside made them alert. Every shadow made them cautious, yet neither showed weakness. Their movements were synchronized as they tended animals and prepared meals. She realized that hardship had made her resilient, yet the presence of another human made resilience lighter shared. Work carried less burden than solitary struggle weeks. Passed with small confrontations from strangers and moments of quiet reflection, the barn became a fortress and a home. Every repaired board, every strengthened fence was a symbol of determination. They had created a space where life could continue. Despite threats, they began to notice small signs of hope. Sunlight reflecting off snow, painting the barn golden, and the morning animals eating peacefully, the wind carrying less cold air through reinforced walls. Your small sign reinforced effort, and patience. Evenings were shared quietly. No need for loud declarations. Conversation flowed in gentle stories and practical planning. Silence was filled with understanding and trust. She felt a cautious optimism, not a naive hope, but an acknowledgement that effort mattered. The stranger beside her was no longer just a visitor. He had become a partner in survival and in quiet life there. World remained fragile. Threats could return at any moment, yet inside the barn they built resilience. Every board, every gesture, every shared glance strengthened their hold. She understood that life was a mixture of struggle and small victories. The barn had seen much, but now it held something new. Shared purpose and quiet understanding. It was a beginning that came from hardship and effort. The land was still harsh, and the world beyond the barn still carried danger, yet for the first time in many years, she did not feel completely alone. The stranger had entered her life and changed the rhythm of her days. Their bond had been tested by threats and strengthened by shared work. They faced the night together, knowing danger might return. Yet there was strength in their union. Each knew the other would act without hesitation to protect what they had built. Trust and care had created a quiet power that no threat could break easily. The barn had become more than shelter. It was a place of learning and resilience and growing companionship. Hardship brought them closer and prepared them for whatever would come next. Their quiet world was small, yet it was filled with meaning and strength. The wind was sharper now, and the cold deeper than before. The barn creaked under the weight of snow and ice inside. The walls, the two of them moved quickly and silently. Every task was urgent. Every glance measured. Trouble had returned. More forcefully than ever, a group of men came with clear intent to take control of the land. They did not speak in polite words. Their presence carried threat in every movement. She watched from a distance as the stranger stepped forward. He did not wait for them to act. He moved with quiet confidence and calculated step. She stayed behind him, knowing he would protect her, yet feeling a tension in her chest. The barn and animals were vulnerable. They could not lose what they had built. The men tested boundaries. They circled the barn and shouted words of demand, threats of violence and theft. Every warning was meant to provoke fear. She felt her hands tighten on the wooden railing. Stranger confronted them with calm firmness, no anger, only measured words. He made them see that taking the land would cost more than they imagined, yet she knew this was only a temporary pause. Men would return if weakness showed. That night they reinforced every part of the barn. Boards, patched fences and gates, secured the animals, moved to sheltered areas. Every sound was a reminder of vulnerability. The night was long and sleep light. She watched the stranger as he worked tirelessly. His energy seemed endless, yet his movements carried. She learned that courage was not loud, but steady and deliberate. Her own strength grew as she followed his lead. Snow and wind battered the barn. The cold made every motion difficult and painful. They worked together silently, each understanding the other without needing words. Trust had become instinctual. The danger increased when the men returned under cover of darkness. Shouts rang across the snow shadows. Move near the barn. The stranger acted quickly, guided her to safer spots while keeping the intruders at a distance. Every decision mattered. She realized fear was no longer the only feeling. There was determination and courage, a desire to protect what mattered even if the risk was great. Morning brought brief relief. Intruders had gone, but warnings lingered every step outside the barn was careful. The land seemed harsher now, the world beyond their walls more dangerous. They spent days preparing for future threats. The barn became fortified beyond its simple beginnings. Every corner examined, every board secured. Animals were sheltered and fed with extra care. Every action was deliberate. During quiet moments, she observed the stranger closely. His past pain was evident, yet he did not let it control his present. He moved with patience and vigilance. She admired how he balanced caution with courage. They shared meals in silence. Mostly conversation was minimal, but meaningful plans for safety and survival became their language. Every glance, a silent exchange of trust and understanding. She thought about her life before him, days of quiet survival alone. Now survival was shared. The burden felt lighter. The barn alive with purpose. Threats were not only rumors reached town. People whispered about ownership and outsiders. She ignored them mostly, yet felt the weight of scrutiny. Every action could be judged and misinterpreted. The stranger reassured her through presence rather than words. He moved to check every fence and board without hesitation. Followed and learned by watching. Trust in action became a shield stronger than any weapon. Cold nights tested patience and endurance. Snow blocked paths and wind rattled walls. They tended animals with care. Ensured food and water remained sufficient. Every motion deliberate. Sometimes she felt fear creeping in the memory of what could be lost. The barn destroyed or animals harmed, yet she did not freeze. She acted with purpose. Alongside him one evening, the threat was close. Anne approached silently and tried to find weak spots. The stranger anticipated them. He moved quickly to block paths and keep animals safe. She helped as best she could, following instructions without question. Every sound outside was a warning, every shadow a test of vigilance. They worked through night into early morning, bodies aching from effort and cold, yet they did not stop after the danger passed. They surveyed the damage, minor injuries and scratches, but the barn remained standing. Animals were safe. Effort had been worth it. They felt exhaustion deep in their bones, but relief in their hearts. Sitting together by the fire, she noticed something in herself. Courage was not about fighting alone. It was about standing together and protecting life. Quietly, love was not declared yet. Care and loyalty filled the space between them. She observed the stranger resting after work, his face relaxed for a moment. A man who had known loss and struggle now had someone beside him who trusted and relied on him. She felt warmth and gratitude. Days passed with heightened alertness. Every movement measured. Threats could come again at any moment. Preparation and awareness became second nature. The barn had become more than a home. It was a fortress and a symbol of resilience. Every repair, a declaration that they would endure. Every shared glance, a silent promise of protection. She realized she had grown stronger, not because she faced hardship alone, but because someone had shared it. The presence of another human made struggle bearable. They worked together, continuously feeding animals, cleaning snow from paths, checking fences, and repairing boards. Every task a bond reinforced, every glance a message of shared purpose. Even in moments of quiet reflection, she felt the tension lingering. The world beyond the barn was harsh and cruel, yet she also felt hope not naive, but steady and rooted in shared effort. The stranger had become essential, not just for protection, but for companionship, for shared understanding and quiet care. They moved together with unspoken trust. One morning she saw signs that more trouble might come, footprints leading toward the barn, not made by animals. She did not panic. She prepared silently, knowing the stranger would be ready. 2 days and nights blurred together. Snow, wind, and cold tested endurance. Every day was a challenge, but also a moment to demonstrate strength. Every night they rested lightly, knowing the world remained dangerous. She reflected on how far they had come from quiet survival to active defense, from loneliness to companionship, from fear to careful courage. The barn had survived storms and threats, so had they. Bond between them, stronger than any fear. Trust and care had created a safe world inside fragile walls. They worked tirelessly to maintain it. Every movement and gesture mattered. Every task carried meaning beyond the simple act. They had built more than shelter. They built resilience and quiet love. The night settled. Finally, snow drifted softly against walls inside. They tended fires and animals watched over each other with quiet care, prepared for whatever the next day might bring. She realized courage came in small acts. Shared work and vigilance and care and attention. Love was present without declaration. It was in actions and shared endurance. The barn stood as a testament to effort and determination, to two people who refused to give up, to trust that had grown into quiet partnership. They faced danger together and survived. The barn and animals safe, trust and care strong. They rested lightly with alert hearts, ready for what came next, prepared because they were no longer alone. Spring arrived slowly, and the snow began to melt from the land. Barn looked worn but alive inside. It held warmth and the quiet rhythm of two people who had endured winter together. Every task now carried a lighter sense of purpose. They moved together with ease and understanding. The road beyond the barn remained uncertain. Travelers passed occasionally, and news reached them, yet danger felt smaller than before. Preparedness and trust had made them stronger. They spent days repairing fences, tending animals, and cleaning the barn. Every task reminded them of resilience and growth. The animals seemed calmer. Now they moved freely and trusted the safety of the barn. They worked in silence. At other times, they shared stories of dreams once thought impossible. The past still lingered, but it no longer dominated. They were learning to live fully in the present. The stranger had become a constant presence, no longer a visitor but part of daily life. Every glance, every gesture carried meaning. Trust, care intertwined with quiet companionship. One afternoon, they paused to watch sunlight move across the land. The barn was alive with warmth, and the world outside seemed softer. She realized she had begun to feel hope again, not the reckless hope of youth, but steady hope rooted in effort. In present days grew warmer, and the animals thrived. Crops planted earlier in the season began to grow. Barn had become a home not just for survival, but for life. She felt pride in what they had achieved together. The stranger also noticed the change. His eyes softened as he observed how she moved through the barn and land. He no longer carried only vigilance, but also quiet joy in their shared space together. They repaired the last cracks in the barn, every nail, every board placed with care. The barn seemed stronger than before, a reflection of the bond between them. They took moments to rest and reflect. Shared meals were simple, yet meaningful. Conversation flowed naturally. Silence was comfortable and filled with understanding. The town began to notice a change. The woman by the barn was no longer quiet and alone. She was strong and capable, and the stranger beside her moved with respect and care. People whispered less out of curiosity and more out of admiration. They spent evenings under the stars, listening to the wind moving through grass, speaking in soft words about life and dreams. No need for declarations, because actions spoke louder than words. The stranger shared more of his journey of loss and survival and lessons learned. She shared stories of endurance and hard work and hope. Regained the exchange, deepened their understanding and trust. Spring storms came, but they were easier to face. Preparedness and experience made challenges manageable. The barn held firm and animals remained safe. They faced difficulties together and learned the value of shared effort. Time passed with quiet growth. Every day brought small victories. Every night brought reflection and quiet companionship. The world outside remained unpredictable, but their bond provided stability. They learned to care for each other without needing words. Every action of protection and consideration reinforced their connection. Trust became second nature, and courage shared. The barn became a symbol of survival and resilience, of quiet love and companionship. Stood not just as a shelter, but as a testament to shared effort. They celebrated small successes: a repaired fence, a healthy animal, a warm meal. Accomplishment reminded them of the strength they had built together. She realized she had grown in ways she had not anticipated, from quiet survival alone to shared life with trust and purpose. The bond with the stranger had transformed her experience. He noticed the change in her as well. Her steps more confident, her actions deliberate, her heart lighter. He felt gratitude for shared work and presence. They had learned to depend on each other without fear. The land around the barn seemed kinder, grass greener, and animals thriving. Barn stood resilient, and secure inside it held warmth and quiet strength. They walked together through fields, checking fences and animals. Every glance and gesture carried meaning. They no longer needed to speak to understand each other. Their bond was visible in action. If in evens brought reflection and quiet conversation, they spoke of dreams and plans of a future built on shared work and care. Hope was present in measured doses, not reckless but steady and real. They spent days repairing barns, fences, and caring for animals. Act reinforced resilience and partnership. Every gesture spoke of trust and care. The stranger taught patience and careful planning. She taught endurance and resourceful thinking together. They created a rhythm that carried them through challenges. Barn no longer felt like only a place of survival. It had become a home filled with trust and companionship. Every corner reflected effort and shared purpose. World beyond the barn still held uncertainty, yet inside they created stability. Every repair, every action built confidence and care. Every night they rested lighter, knowing they were not alone. They tended animals and crops with care. Every meal shared became more than nourishment. Every glance and gesture reinforced connection. Spring turned into summer. The barn was vibrant and alive. The land yielded growth and life, the bond between them stronger than any challenge they had faced. They walked through fields together, observing progress, repairing fences, feeding animals, and preparing for storms. Every motion an act of connection and resilience. Evenings spent under stars became moments of reflection. Conversation flowed freely about past struggles and present joy. No need for promises. Words alone could not capture their bond. The barn became a home not just for animals, it became a home for shared trust and quiet love. Every repaired board, every careful gesture reflected dedication. They noticed beauty in small things: sunlight on grass, the sound of animals moving freely, the warmth of fire in the barn on a cold night, all small reminders of effort rewarded. They celebrated small victories, not with fanfare but with quiet acknowledgement. Every accomplishment reinforced trust and shared effort. She felt courage and hope in equal measure. Reckless, but grounded in experience and companionship, the stranger felt the same. Together, they built more than shelter. They built life with trust, care, and quiet love. The barn stood firm, resilient, and a lively symbol of their endurance and partnership. Every corner held memory and effort. Every repaired board reflected trust and care. They spent days and nights tending life together. Every task carried meaning beyond survival. Every glance and gesture strengthened connections. Summer brought growth and warmth. The barn and land thrived under care and attention. The bond between them reflected strength, resilience, and quiet love. They faced challenges with calm preparedness. Every action reflected learned experience and shared courage. Trust had become instinctual, and care effortless. The barn had survived storms and threats, so had they. The bond formed through hardship and effort now flourished in quiet companionship. They rested lightly each night with strength and peace, knowing they were not alone. The land stretched before them, alive and vibrant. The barn stood as a testament to shared effort, trust, care, and endurance. And changed slowly, and the land around the barn shifted with them. Green fields replaced snow-covered ground, and the sun warmed the barn and surrounding land. Inside the barn, life moved with rhythm and purpose. Bond between the two people had grown deeper over time. Every morning they rose together to tend animals and prepare food. The work was steady and necessary. Every small task reinforced their connection and shared responsibility. The barn no longer felt only like shelter. It was a home filled with trust, care, and quiet companionship. They noticed the subtle signs of life. Returning to the land, birds sang in the trees and animals grazed peacefully. The sun painted the barn in warm light. Each morning, every detail reminded them of what they had endured and what they had built together. The stranger moved with ease and confidence, no longer wary of every passing shadow. He had learned to trust and to rely on shared strengths. She moved beside him with quiet assurance. Her confidence and careful observation complemented his presence. Together, they repaired fences and tended the animals. Every action carried meaning beyond survival. Every glance and gesture reflected understanding and respect. They no longer needed to speak to communicate intent, and care evenings were spent by firelight inside the barn they shared. Small meals and conversation, memories of past struggles were spoken, softly dreams for the future were whispered without urgency. Bond between them grew in subtle and steady ways. The barn had endured storms and threats from outsiders. Every repaired board and secured fence symbolized resilience. It held not just animals and tools, but also the history of struggle and endurance. Fray, Crack, and Mark told a story of survival and care. The land itself seemed gentler. Streams flowed freely and grass grew tall. Wildflowers appeared in patches. Nature reflected the quiet restoration of life within the barn. World outside remained unpredictable, but they had learned to face it together. They spent mornings walking the fields, checking crops and animals, every movement. Careful and deliberate shared routines strengthened trust and deepened connection. The barn had become the center of life and security. She observed the stranger resting for a moment near the barn. His expression soft and relaxed. A man who had once been alone now shared life with someone who understood his past and valued his presence. Though warmth of shared effort and trust was evident in every gesture. They worked together to prepare for challenges that might come, whether it could be harsh and neighbors. Unpredictably, every task from repairing fences to tending animals was done with foresight and care. Their partnership was grounded in action and mutual respect. Barn became a symbol of their journey. Every nail driven and board replaced represented resilience and dedication. Every shared moment of care reinforced the bond between them. The barn was more than a building. It was proof of trust and quiet love. Seasons shifted and time passed with steady rhythm. They continued daily routines with each challenges were met with preparation and teamwork. The presence of each other made difficult tasks manageable. They spent quiet moments reflecting on how far they had come from loneliness and survival to shared life and companionship. Trust and care had replaced fear and isolation. The barn had become a sanctuary, not only for animals, but also for the heart. They noticed the subtle changes in each other. Stranger moved with patience and calm. She moved with confidence and quiet strength. Every glance and gesture reinforced the bond formed through hardship and shared effort. Effortings were now filled with calm contentment. They spoke softly of dreams and plans. No need for grand declarations. Their actions and shared routines conveyed commitment and care. The animals thrived under careful attention. Horses grazed freely and dogs moved without fear. Every sound and movement in the barn reflected life and trust. The land itself seemed to respond to the care it received. They spent days reinforcing fences and preparing for seasonal changes. Every task an act of care and connection. Every small accomplishment a reminder of resilience and shared purpose. They learned to communicate without words. A glance or gesture conveyed understanding. Actions carried meaning and reinforced trust. Bond between them was visible in every shared moment. The barn had survived storms and threats. It stood firm and secure inside. It held warmth and life. It reflected the endurance and care of its inhabitants. They walked through the fields together, observing the growth of crops and animals. Every step, deliberate every movement, an act of shared responsibility and care. Their connection strengthened with each passing day. Evenings brought moments of quiet reflection and conversation. They spoke of the past and dreams for the future. Hope and resilience were present in every word and gesture. The bond between them grew without the need for dramatic declarations. The barn had become a home not only for animals, but for trust and companionship. Every corner reflected care and shared effort. Every repair and task reinforced resilience and partnership. Land surrounding the barn flourished. Streams flowed freely and grass grew tall. Wildflowers appeared and the air was filled with life. The world outside remained unpredictable, but within the barn they found stability. Celebrated small victories. Quietly repaired fence. A healthy animal. A well-tended field. Each accomplishment reinforced the strength of their bond. Shared effort and trust created life and security. She realized the growth in herself from solitary survival to shared life and trust. The bond with the stranger transformed daily routines into meaningful life. The stranger also felt the change in her confidence. Patience and quiet care had replaced fear and isolation there. Bond was a visible connection of trust and shared effort. They continued daily routines of tending animals, repairing fences, and caring for the land. Every task carried purpose and meaning beyond survival. Every glance and gesture reinforced understanding and companionship. Evenings were spent under stars, listening to wind through grass. Conversation flowed about past struggles and future dreams. Every word and action reinforced connection and trust. The barn had become a symbol of endurance and shared life. Seasons passed and life continued with steady rhythm. They faced challenges with preparation and teamwork. Trust and care guided every action. The barn stood resilient and alive. The land flourished and the animals thrived. Every corner of the barn reflected effort, care, and shared purpose. Bond between them strengthened through daily life. They learned the quiet power of shared endurance. Actions of care and attention carried more meaning than words. Every task became an act of connection, and love. The barn remained a sanctuary for animals and for the two people who had endured and grown together. Every repaired board, every careful gesture reflected trust and resilience. They spent days tending animals in fields with care. Every movement and task carried meaning and reinforced partnership. Barn had become a home of quiet love and shared life. Evenings brought reflection on the past and hopes for the future. Trust, care, and companionship guided every action. The bond between them grew steadily and quietly. The barn stood firm and the land flourished inside. It held warmth, life, and resilience. Every corner reflected shared effort and quiet love. They continued daily routines with care and purpose. Every glance, gesture, and action reinforced trust and connection. Barn and land reflected the growth of shared life and companionship. Seasons passed and life moved steadily. Challenges were met together with patience and preparedness. The bond between them strengthened through every shared moment. The barn became more than shelter. It became a symbol of trust, care, and quiet love. Every repaired board and carefully tended animal reflected their shared life. Evenings under stars brought reflection and gentle conversation. They spoke softly about dreams and future plans. Hope and resilience were ever present. The bond between them deepened quietly and steadily. The land around the barn remained vibrant, and alive. Streams flowed and grass grew. Wildflowers dotted the field's life, and growth reflected the care and effort given to it. They celebrated accomplishments in quiet ways. A healthy animal, a repaired fence, flourishing field. Every small victory reinforced trust and shared effort. Barn and land stood as proof of endurance and quiet love. Every corner reflected care and shared responsibility. Every task and gesture reinforced partnership and connection. They continued to face life together. Every day brought shared work and trust. The barn remained a home of warmth, resilience, and companionship. Bond between them deepened steadily. Evenings were quiet and filled with reflection and conversation. They spoke softly of past struggles and future dreams. Every word and action reinforced trust and care. The barn was a testament to shared life and enduring connection. Seasons passed, and the barn remained resilient. The land flourished, and the animals thrived inside. Trust, care, and quiet love grew steadily. Every task and gesture reinforced the bond between them. Lived with purpose, patience, and trust. Every moment of care strengthened connection. Every repaired board, every tended animal carried meaning. The barn and land stood as symbols of endurance. Every corner reflected shared effort and quiet love. Every gesture and action reinforced trust and companionship. Life continued steadily with shared work and careful attention. The barn was a home alive with trust, care, and enduring companionship. The bond between them grew quietly, deeply, and with strength. The land had settled into a rhythm that mirrored the steady work of the two people who lived by the barn. Each day was defined by care and attention to the animals, the land, and each other. Sunlight stretched over green fields and painted shadows through the cracks of the barn walls. The quiet presence of life and growth reminded them of the months they had endured and the bond that had formed. Morning light crept through the small windows, and illuminated the dust in golden streaks. They rose together to tend to animals that moved with the confidence of those who felt safe. Horses grazed calmly, dogs circled, and cows lowed softly in the stalls. Each animal responded to the care they received with trust and calmed their work began with feeding and watering, then moved to checking fences and examining the barn for repairs. Small cracks received attention, every nail driven and board replaced. Carried more than practical purpose, it reflected dedication, perseverance, and shared responsibility. They walked through fields together, examining crops green. Shoots pushed through soil that had been hardened by winter and spring rains. Every plant was tended carefully with hands that had learned patience and careful observation. The land responded with growth and quiet beauty. Evenings were spent inside the barn around the small fire. They shared simple meals and talked softly about past struggles and the work they had done to survive. Sometimes they sat in silence, letting the warmth of the fire fill the space. It was comfortable and reassuring. They took notice of changes in each other's confidence, placed caution in her movements, and he carried a lighter expression where once he had been wary and tense. Now he was steady and calm. Trust and companionship between them allowed growth without words. Storms still came, and the barn creaked under wind and rain. They worked together to secure animals and protect the property. Every challenge strengthened the bond that had formed through shared experience. They no longer feared hardship because they faced it together. The road nearby remained a reminder of the world outside. Travelers passed occasionally and brought news. Sometimes a stranger lingered near the barn, but they had learned to observe carefully before acting. The land and barn required vigilance. Even as the days passed peacefully, they learned more about each other's small habits, revealed themselves through routines and shared work. They noticed how the other moved through space, handled animals, and interacted with the land. These subtle details strengthened their understanding and connection. Animals thrived under their care. Horses moved freely in pastures and dogs stayed close. The cows provided milk, and the fields yielded crops that promised sustenance for the months to come. Life felt steady and meaningful. They began to plan for the future, not with grand ambition, but with careful steps. New crops were planted and fences improved. The barn received small upgrades to make daily work easier. Improvement reflected foresight, and evenings under stars became moments of reflection. They spoke softly about what they had endured and what they hoped to build. The bond between them deepened with each conversation and shared gesture. Love was present without needing words. Existed in the trust, care, and effort shared between them. Their lives were shaped by routine, yet every day carried small moments of discovery. A bird nesting nearby, a patch of wildflowers blooming in the sun, or a young calf taking its first steps. These small signs of life brought joy and a sense of accomplishment. They repaired and maintained tools together, every hammer and saw used carefully. Every repair reflected more than necessitate, carried a message of persistence and commitment to the land and each other. The barn stood as a symbol of their shared effort. Cracks and repairs told the story of resilience. Walls that had withstood storms now reflected care and vigilance. Every corner had a mark of their time spent working and living together. They moved with quiet coordination, feeding animals, repairing fences, and tending crops became a shared dance. Every step was deliberate, every gesture meaningful. Trust and understanding guided actions without the need for words. They shared meals cooked over small stoves inside the barn. Simple food prepared with care and eaten slowly. Conversation was light and reflective. They spoke of past struggles, moments of hardship, and small triumphs. The stories shared reinforced respect and understanding.